The dust from the stagecoach hadn't even settled when Sarah Keller realized her father was dead, and her entire world had collapsed in the span of a single afternoon. She stood in the cramped office of the town lawyer in Johnson City, Texas, her black mourning dress sticking to her back in the oppressive June heat of 1878, listening to words that felt like stones dropping into her stomach. Bankrupt, foreclosed, destitute. The ranch her father had poured his life into for 23 years was gone, sold to pay debts she hadn't even known existed. At 21 years old, Sarah found herself utterly alone with exactly $14.37 to her name, standing in a town where she knew almost no one, with nowhere to go and no family left in this world. The lawyer, a portly man named Henderson with spectacles that kept sliding down his sweaty nose, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Miss Keller, I understand this is difficult, but you must face facts. A woman alone in this territory, with no means of support, well, it simply isn't viable. You need protection, a household, a name. I've taken the liberty of speaking with several gentlemen in town who might be willing to consider a marriage arrangement. Sarah's head snapped up, her green eyes flashing. Marriage arrangement? You mean you've been shopping me around like a horse at auction before my father was even cold in his grave? Henderson had the decency to look uncomfortable, but his voice remained firm. Miss Keller, I'm trying to help you. Without a husband, you have no prospects. You can't work in most establishments. A woman of your, refinement. The boarding house is $3 a week, which gives you less than 5 weeks before you're on the street. Marriage is your only real option to survive. The words hit her like a physical blow because deep down, Sarah knew he was probably right. In 1878, in a rough town like Johnson City, a woman without family or fortune had precious few choices. She could become a maid, working herself to the bone for pennies. She could try to find work as a seamstress, though the town already had two and barely supported them. Or she could accept one of these marriage proposals from men who saw her as a solution to their need for a cook and bed warmer rather than as a person. Who are these men? Sarah asked, her voice tight. Henderson pulled out a piece of paper. Well, there's Morton Briggs. He owns the feed store, widower, needs someone to help raise his 5 children. Then there's Samuel Peterson. He has a homestead about 15 miles north, getting on in years but stable. And Harold Wickham has also expressed interest. He's the banker's son, though he has had some trouble with drink, but his family would provide for you. Each name felt like a nail in a coffin. Sarah had seen Morton Briggs in town, a harsh man who yelled at his children in the street. Samuel Peterson had to be at least 60 years old, and Harold Wickham was notorious for stumbling drunk through town, causing disturbances. These were her options. These were the men who would own her, control her, decide every aspect of her life if she agreed. I need time to think, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You have until the end of the week, Henderson replied, not unkindly. After that, I'm afraid I can't hold off the creditors any longer. The boarding house is expecting you. I've paid for 3 nights as a courtesy, but beyond that... Sarah left the office in a daze, walking through the dusty streets of Johnson City with her small carpet bag clutching everything she owned. The town was busy with afternoon activity. Cowboys rode through, heading to the saloon. Women in nicer dresses than hers shopped at the general store. The sound of a hammer rang from the blacksmith's shop. Life continued as normal while hers crumbled. The boarding house was a 2-story wooden building that had seen better days, run by a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Crawford, who showed Sarah to a tiny room with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out onto the alley. It was clean but sparse, and as soon as Mrs. Crawford left, Sarah sat on the bed and finally let the tears come. She cried for her father, dead of a heart attack while trying to save a failing ranch. She cried for her mother, gone 5 years now from pneumonia. She cried for herself and the future that seemed to hold nothing but resignation to a life she didn't want. When the tears finally stopped, Sarah washed her face and stared at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the washstand. Her reflection showed a young woman with auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun, green eyes red-rimmed from crying, a face that was pretty enough, but currently etched with exhaustion and grief. She looked like someone defeated, and Sarah hated that. "I will not be defeated," she whispered to her reflection. "There has to be another way." But what way? The question haunted her as she lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the town outside her window. Somewhere a piano played badly. Men shouted and laughed. A dog barked. And Sarah Keller tried to imagine a future that didn't involve marrying a stranger just to survive. The next morning, Sarah decided to explore the town properly. If she was going to find any alternative to marriage, she needed to understand what Johnson City had to offer. She put on her only other dress, a simple brown calico that had seen better days, and walked through the streets with purpose. Johnson City wasn't a large town, but it was growing. The railroad had come through 2 years earlier, bringing commerce and people. There was a main street with the essential businesses: general store, saloon, hotel, bank, blacksmith, livery stable, doctor's office, and the land office. Side streets branched off with homes, the boarding house, a small church, and various other establishments. Sarah walked into the general store, a bell tinkling as she entered. The proprietor, a friendly-looking man with a thick mustache, greeted her warmly. "Morning, miss. What can I help you with today?" "I'm looking for work, actually," Sarah said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Do you know of anyone hiring?" The man's face fell sympathetically. "You're Sarah Keller, aren't you? Heard about your father." "Terrible thing. As for work, well, I'm afraid there isn't much for a young lady. The hotel sometimes needs help with laundry, but that's backbreaking work and doesn't pay much. Mrs. Chen at the restaurant might need a waitress, but she usually hires, well, women who are a bit rougher around the edges, if you understand my meaning." Sarah understood. He meant women who could handle drunk cowboys grabbing at them, who could curse back and hold their own in rough company. Sarah had been raised on a ranch, but her father had sheltered her, sent her to school in San Antonio for 2 years, taught her to read and write and cipher. She wasn't prepared for that kind of work. "Thank you anyway," Sarah said, trying not to let her disappointment show. She spent the rest of the morning going from business to business with the same results. No one was hiring, or if they were, the work was unsuitable, or the pay was so low it wouldn't keep her fed, let alone housed. By noon, Sarah found herself sitting on a bench outside the general store, watching the town flow around her and feeling desperation creep in. That was when she noticed the cowboy. He was across the street, loading supplies into a wagon with practiced efficiency. He was tall, lean but muscular, with sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar under a worn Stetson. His face was tanned from long hours in the sun, with strong features and a jaw that suggested stubbornness. But it was the way he moved that caught Sarah's attention. He was competent, calm, methodical. He didn't waste motion or energy. And when a young boy ran past chasing a hoop and stumbled, the cowboy caught him easily, steadied him with a smile, and sent him on his way. There was something about him that drew Sarah's attention, though she couldn't say exactly what. Maybe it was just that he seemed capable in a way that felt reassuring in her current state of upheaval. The cowboy finished loading his wagon and went into the general store. Sarah found herself still sitting there when he came out 10 minutes later with a final bag of supplies. He loaded it into the wagon, then paused, wiping his brow with his sleeve. His eyes scanned the street and landed on Sarah. For a moment, their gazes met. His eyes were blue, she noticed, even from this distance, a clear light blue like the sky after a storm. Then he tipped his hat politely to her, climbed into the wagon, and drove away, heading out of town toward the west. Sarah watched him go, then shook herself mentally. What was she doing, staring at strange cowboys? She had real problems to solve. She spent the afternoon at the small town library, really just a room attached to the church with donated books. The elderly woman who maintained it let Sarah browse, and she pulled out books about Texas, about homesteading, about business. She was looking for ideas, for any possible path forward that didn't involve marrying Morton Briggs, or Samuel Peterson, or Harold Wickham. The homestead laws caught her attention. Under certain provisions, unmarried women could file claims on public land, but it required money for filing fees and equipment, money Sarah didn't have, and homesteading alone as a woman was nearly impossible anyway. She would need help to build a cabin, to plow fields, to defend the property. As the sun began to set, Sarah returned to the boarding house feeling even more discouraged. Mrs. Crawford had left a plate of cold supper in the dining room for her: beans, cornbread, and a bit of salt pork. Sarah ate mechanically, tasting nothing. "You're the Keller girl, aren't you?" a voice said. Sarah looked up to find another boarder, a woman in her 30s with hard eyes and a painted face. She was clearly one of the saloon girls, probably renting a room here because it was cheaper and more respectable than living above the saloon. "Yes," Sarah replied quietly. The woman sat down across from her without invitation. "I'm Ruby. Heard you're in a tough spot. Henderson been pushing you to get married?" Sarah nodded, not sure what to make of this woman. Ruby laughed, a harsh sound. "That's Henderson for you. Thinks marriage fixes everything for a woman. Sometimes it does, I suppose, if you get a decent man. But marry the wrong one and you're in for a life of misery with no escape." "You sound like you speak from experience," Sarah said. "I do." Ruby's face hardened. "I was married once. He beat me, drank away every penny I could earn taking in washing, and finally I ran. That's how I ended up here, doing what I do. Not respectable, but at least I answer only to myself now." Sarah felt a chill. Was that her future? Marry wrong and end up trapped, or refuse marriage and end up like Ruby? "There has to be another way," Sarah said, more to herself than to Ruby. Ruby studied her for a long moment. "Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But I'll tell you this, girl. Whatever you decide, make sure it's your choice. Don't let them push you into something just because it's convenient for them." With that cryptic advice, Ruby stood and left, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her rapidly dwindling options. The next day was Wednesday, which meant Sarah had 3 days left before Henderson expected her decision. She woke early, dressed carefully, and decided to do something bold. She was going to go to each of the men who had expressed interest in marrying her and meet them herself. If she was going to be forced into marriage, she at least wanted to see her options clearly. Morton Briggs was first. His feed store opened early, and Sarah arrived just after dawn. Briggs was a stocky man in his 40s, with thinning hair and a perpetual scowl. When Sarah introduced herself and explained why she was there, his scowl deepened. "Henderson said you'd come around," Briggs said, looking her up and down like he was evaluating livestock. "You're younger than my last wife. That's good. You strong? My children need a firm hand, and there's a lot of work in a household." "I was raised on a ranch," Sarah said. "I know hard work." "Good. I can't pay you nothing, of course. You'd be my wife, but you'd have a roof and food. I expect a clean house, meals on time, and obedience. I'm the head of my household, and I won't tolerate backtalk. You able to bear children? I'd like a few more. Sons, preferably." Sarah felt her stomach turn. He was discussing this like a business transaction, because for him, that's exactly what it was. "How did your wife die, Mr. Briggs?" she asked. Childbed fever with the last one," he said flatly. "The baby died too. That was 8 months ago. The older children are running wild, and I need someone to manage them. You interested or not?" Sarah looked into his cold eyes and knew with absolute certainty that if she married this man, she would be miserable every day of her life. "I need to consider all my options," she said carefully. "Thank you for your time." She left before he could respond, her heart pounding. 1 down, 2 to go. Samuel Peterson was next, and that required borrowing a horse, which cost Sarah 50 cents she could ill afford. His homestead was indeed about 15 miles north, a rough ride through scrubland and rocky terrain. When she arrived, she found Peterson sitting on the porch of a rundown cabin, whittling. He was old, Sarah saw immediately. Not just in his 60s, but aged beyond his years, with gnarled hands and a bent back. He squinted at her as she dismounted. "You're the Keller girl," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. I wanted to meet you before making any decisions." Peterson nodded slowly. "Sensible. Come sit." They sat on the porch and he explained his situation with blunt honesty. He was 63 years old. His health was failing, and he needed someone to care for him and the homestead. In exchange, when he died, which he figured would be within 5 years, everything would go to his widow. "I won't lie to you, girl," he said. "I'm old and not pleasant to look at, and my body don't work like it used to. But I'd treat you decent, and you'd inherit land and a cabin. It's not much, but it's something. More than you got now, I reckon." Sarah appreciated his honesty, but the thought of spending years caring for a dying old man, sharing his bed even if he was incapable of much, waiting for him to pass so she could inherit a run-down homestead in the middle of nowhere, it was unbearably depressing. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Peterson," Sarah said. "May I have a few days to think?" "Henderson said by end of week," Peterson replied. "That's fine by me. But don't wait too long, girl. Options don't improve with time, not for women in your situation." The ride back to Johnson City felt longer than the ride out. Sarah returned the horse to the livery stable, paying another 50 cents, and went to find Harold Wickham. She found him, unfortunately, already drunk at 2 in the afternoon, propping up the bar in the saloon. When Sarah entered, the room went quiet. Respectable women didn't enter saloons, but Sarah was past caring about some proprieties. "Mr. Wickham," she said, standing near the doorway because she wasn't willing to go further into the establishment. "I'd like to speak with you." Harold Wickham turned, nearly falling off his stool. He was probably handsome when sober, a man in his late 20s with dark hair and fine features. But drink had already started to blur those features, to put red in his cheeks and a tremor in his hands. "Well, well," he slurred, grinning. "The pretty little Keller girl. Come to accept my generous offer?" "I came to meet you before making any decisions," Sarah said coolly. "Smart, smart," Harold said, stumbling toward her. He smelled of whiskey and unwashed clothes. "I can offer you a lot, you know. My father's rich. You'd have a fine house, nice dresses, everything a woman could want. Except a sober husband," Sarah said before she could stop herself. Harold's face darkened. "Now you listen here, girl. You're in no position to be picky. You're penniless and alone. I'm offering you a life of comfort. So what if I like a drink? A wife's supposed to be understanding, supportive. A wife is supposed to be a partner, not a nursemaid to a drunk," Sarah shot back, her temper flaring. Harold grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully. "You little witch. You should be grateful anyone wants you at all." "Let go of me," Sarah said, trying to pull away. "I don't think so. You need to learn some manners, and maybe I'm just the man to teach you." Suddenly, Harold's grip was gone. Sarah stumbled back and saw that someone had grabbed Harold by the collar and physically lifted him away from her. It was the cowboy she had seen loading his wagon the day before. Up close, he was even more striking, with those clear blue eyes now blazing with anger. "The lady asked you to let go," the cowboy said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Where I come from, when a lady says no, you listen." Harold, even drunk, was smart enough to recognize danger. The cowboy was taller and clearly stronger, with the kind of lean muscle that came from hard work. "I wasn't hurting her," Harold mumbled. "Just talking." "Looked like more than talking to me," the cowboy said. He hadn't released Harold's collar. "I think you owe the lady an apology." "Sorry," Harold muttered, not meeting Sarah's eyes. The cowboy released him with a slight push that sent Harold stumbling back to the bar. Then he turned to Sarah. "Are you all right, madam?" "Yes, thank you," Sarah said, her heart still pounding from the confrontation. I should go. I'll walk you out, the cowboy said. It wasn't really a question. They left the saloon together, and as soon as they were on the street, Sarah took a deep breath of fresh air, trying to calm herself. The cowboy stood beside her, his presence somehow both calming and unsettling. Thank you, Sarah said again. That was kind of you. Wasn't kindness, the cowboy said. Just basic decency. No man should put hands on a woman like that. He paused, then added, You're Sarah Keller, aren't you? I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. And you are? Grant Coleman, he said, touching his hat brim. I have a horse ranch about 10 miles west of here. I was in town for supplies yesterday, and today I came back because I forgot to order something at the smithy. Grant Coleman, the name suited him somehow. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Coleman, even under these circumstances. Grant's blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made Sarah want to look away, but she held his gaze. Can I ask what you were doing in there? That's not a place for a lady like you. A lady like me has very few options right now, Sarah said bitterly. All the frustration and fear of the past days suddenly bubbled up. I'm being told that marriage is my only option to survive. Those three men, Briggs, Peterson, and Wickham, they're my choices. I was trying to meet them, to see which prison I should volunteer for. She hadn't meant to say so much, especially not to a stranger, but something about Grant Coleman invited confidence. Maybe it was the way he listened, really listened, his full attention on her. Those are terrible choices, Grant said bluntly. Briggs is a tyrant. Peterson is practically on his deathbed, and Wickham is a drunk who's going to squander his father's money within 5 years. Despite everything, Sarah almost laughed. You don't mince words, do you? Never saw the point, Grant said. Life's too short to dance around the truth. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, What would you do if you had options beyond marriage? The question caught Sarah off guard. No one had asked her that. Everyone had simply told her what she should do, what she must do. But no one had asked what she wanted. I don't know, Sarah admitted. I used to help my father with the ranch. I can keep books, manage accounts. I can ride, rope, help with branding if needed. I learned from my father. But those skills don't seem to have value for a woman in town. They have value, Grant said. Just maybe not in the places you've been looking. He seemed to be thinking about something, working through an idea. Miss Keller, would you allow me to buy you a coffee? There's something I'd like to propose, and it's not marriage. Sarah should have said no. She didn't know this man. But desperation and curiosity, and something else, something about the way Grant Coleman looked at her like she was a person rather than a problem to be solved, made her say yes. They went to the small restaurant attached to the hotel, and Grant ordered coffee and some sandwiches that Sarah hadn't realized she was hungry for until they arrived. As she ate, Grant explained. I have a horse ranch, he said. About 10 miles west of here, like I said. It's a good spread, 200 acres with water rights to a creek that runs year-round. I breed and train horses, sell to the cavalry, to ranchers, to anyone who needs good stock. Business is good growing, actually. The problem is I'm doing everything myself and I can't keep up. Why not hire help? Sarah asked. I've tried, Grant said, but good ranch hands want cash wages, and most of my capital is tied up in breeding stock right now. I've got some colts that won't be ready to sell until next spring, but when they do sell, I'll make good money. The other problem is I need someone who can handle the business end, the books and accounts and correspondence. I'm good with horses, but I'm not much for paperwork. Sarah was beginning to see where this was going. You need a bookkeeper. I need more than that, Grant said. I need someone who can help with the horses too, someone who's not afraid of hard work. You said you worked your father's ranch. Can you actually do ranch work, or was that just helping out here and there? Sarah bristled slightly. I can do the work. My father didn't have money for hired hands the last few years. It was just him and me. I've branded cattle, mended fences, helped birth foals. I can ride as well as most men, and I'm a decent shot with a rifle. Grant's eyes lit up with something like respect. Then I have a proposition for you, Miss Keller. Come work for me. I can't pay much in cash right now, maybe $10 a month, but I can provide room and board. You'd have your own space in the cabin, completely separate and private. You'd help with the horses, keep my books, help me get organized. It would be hard work, but honest work. And when those colts sell in the spring, I can pay you a bonus and increase your wages. Sarah stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. You're offering me a job? Real employment? I am, Grant said. I won't lie to you, it won't be easy. The ranch is remote and it's just me out there. But I promise you'd be safe and treated with respect. And if you don't like it, if it doesn't work out, I'll bring you back to town. No questions asked. Why? Sarah asked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Grant was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. 5 years ago, my sister was in a situation not too different from yours. Our parents died and she was alone. People told her she had to marry, pushed her toward men who would have made her miserable. She got lucky. She met a good man who saw her as a partner, not property. They're happy now, have a ranch up in Colorado. But I remember how scared she was, how trapped she felt. If I can give you an option beyond marrying someone like Harold Wickham, well, I figure I should. There was such sincerity in his voice that Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This stranger was offering her exactly what she had been desperately hoping for. A third option, a way forward that didn't involve surrendering her entire self to a man she didn't love. When would I start? Sarah asked. Grant smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to truly striking. How about tomorrow? I'll come get you in the morning, bring you out to the ranch, show you around. You can decide then if you want to take the job. I'll take it, Sarah said immediately. I don't need to see the ranch. You're offering me independence and honest work. That's worth more than comfort or security right now. You should still see it before deciding, Grant said. I want you to know exactly what you're agreeing to. How about this? I'll come by the boarding house at dawn tomorrow. Bring whatever belongings you have. We'll go to the ranch, I'll show you everything, and if you still want the job, you can stay. If not, I'll bring you back. Deal? Sarah extended her hand across the table. Deal. Grant shook her hand, his grip warm and firm and steady, and Sarah felt something shift inside her. Hope. For the first time since her father's death, she felt hope. The next morning, Sarah was packed and waiting when Grant arrived with his wagon. Mrs. Crawford had been skeptical when Sarah explained she was leaving to work at a horse ranch, but Sarah paid her the remaining rent she owed and thanked her for her hospitality. If Mrs. Crawford thought Sarah was making a mistake, at least she had the grace not to say so. The ride to Grant's ranch took about 90 minutes, following a rutted trail that wound through scrubland and then began to climb into slightly higher ground where the grass grew thicker and clusters of oak trees provided shade. Grant kept up a steady conversation during the ride, pointing out landmarks and explaining the geography of the area. That's the Pedernales River to the north, he said, gesturing. It floods in spring, but it's low now. My land borders it on the northern edge, which is valuable for the water rights. The creek that runs through my property feeds off the river. How long have you had the ranch? Sarah asked. 3 years, Grant said. I worked as a wrangler for different outfits for about 6 years after I left home, saved every penny I could. When this land came available, I bought it and started breeding horses. It's been slow going but steady. I've built a reputation for good stock. How old are you, if you don't mind my asking? 27, Grant said. You? 21. Grant nodded. You're young to have lost both parents and been on your own. That takes strength. Sarah didn't feel strong, but she appreciated the sentiment. As they rode, she studied Grant more openly than she had in town. He was weathered from outdoor work, with fine lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun. His hands on the reins were calloused and capable. He wore plain clothes, work-worn denim and a cotton shirt, but everything was clean and well-maintained. There was a carefulness about him, an attention to detail that Sarah found reassuring. When they crested a low hill, Grant pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said, and there was pride in his voice. Sarah looked down into a shallow valley and caught her breath. The ranch was beautiful. A cabin sat near a cluster of oak trees, built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney. Behind it was a large barn, a corral, and several paddocks where horses grazed. The creek Grant had mentioned ran along the eastern edge of the property, glinting silver in the morning sun. The land rolled gently, covered in good grass, and in the distance, Sarah could see more horses dotting the landscape. "It's wonderful," Sarah said honestly. Grant smiled, pleased. "It's home. Come on, I'll show you around." The next hour passed in a blur as Grant gave Sarah a thorough tour. The cabin was larger than it looked from a distance, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms, and a small loft. Grant showed her the smaller bedroom. "This would be yours," he said. "I built it thinking I might hire help someday. It's got a door that latches from the inside for privacy. I sleep in the other room, and I'm a sound sleeper. You won't be disturbed." The room was simple but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out toward the creek. It was infinitely better than the room at the boarding house. "The barn is well stocked," Grant continued as they walked outside. "I've got 10 mares right now, 3 stallions, and 7 colts and fillies in various stages of training. The young ones are what will bring in good money come spring. Cavalry is always looking for good horses." He showed her the feed storage, the tack room, the small chicken coop behind the barn, where a dozen hens scratched in the dirt. "Fresh eggs every morning," Grant said. "I've also got a vegetable garden, though I'm not much good at maintaining it. Maybe that's something you could help with." "I can manage a garden," Sarah said. Her mother had kept a large one, and Sarah remembered the basics. They spent the rest of the morning with the horses. Grant introduced her to each one, explaining their temperaments and training status. He clearly loved the animals, and they responded to him with trust and affection. Sarah watched as he worked with a young colt, patient and firm, teaching it to accept a saddle blanket. "You have a gift with them," Sarah observed. "Horses are honest," Grant said. "They don't lie or play games. You treat them right, they'll give you everything they have." "I respect that." By midday, Grant had shown Sarah everything, and they returned to the cabin. He prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, apologizing for his limited cooking skills. "I mostly eat to fuel myself," he admitted. "I'm not much for fancy food." "Neither am I," Sarah said. "But I can cook better than this, if that's part of my duties." "It is, if you're willing," Grant said. He met her eyes across the rough wooden table. "So what do you think? Is this something you want to do?" Sarah looked around the cabin, out the window at the beautiful land beyond, and felt a certainty she hadn't expected. "Yes," she said. "I want to stay." Grant's face broke into a genuine smile. "I'm glad. I think this is going to work out well for both of us." They spent the afternoon going over the books, and Sarah was appalled at the state of Grant's record-keeping. He had bills and receipts stuffed in a box, notes scribbled on random pieces of paper, contracts that weren't filed in any order. "This is going to take me weeks to sort out," Sarah said, but she wasn't complaining. It felt good to have a project, a purpose. "That's why I need you," Grant said. "I know it's bad. I just don't have time to deal with it properly." Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon organizing, while Grant went back to work with the horses. By evening, she had created a basic filing system and identified which accounts were outstanding and which had been paid. It was satisfying work, using her mind and her education. For dinner, Sarah took over the kitchen and made a proper meal with the supplies Grant had. It wasn't fancy, just fried salt pork, beans seasoned properly, fresh biscuits, and even a cobbler made from preserved peaches she found in the pantry. Grant ate like a man starved, praising every bite. "This is the best meal I've had in months," he said. maybe years. It's just basic cooking, Sarah said, but she was pleased. That first evening set the pattern for the days that followed. Sarah woke at dawn and helped Grant with the morning chores, feeding and watering the horses, collecting eggs, tending the garden. Then while Grant worked with the animals, training and exercising them, Sarah focused on the books and paperwork, slowly bringing order to the chaos of Grant's business records. In the afternoons, she often joined Grant outside, helping with whatever was needed, mending fences, grooming horses, even assisting with training the younger animals. The work was hard, much harder than Sarah had expected, but it was also deeply satisfying. Every night she fell into bed exhausted but content, knowing she had earned her place, that she was contributing something real and valuable. Grant treated her with unfailing respect, never making her feel uncomfortable or unsafe. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He was fair, hardworking, and kind to both Sarah and the animals. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to relax into her new life. The knot of anxiety that had been lodged in her chest since her father's death slowly loosened. She had found her footing, found a place where she belonged, at least for now. But she also began to notice other things. The way her heart beat a little faster when Grant smiled at her. The way she found herself watching him work, admiring the competent way he handled the horses, the lean strength of his body. The way conversation between them grew easier, more natural, punctuated by comfortable silences that didn't need filling. Grant seemed to be noticing things too. Sarah caught him watching her sometimes, his blue eyes thoughtful. He started finding excuses to work near wherever she was. When they sat together in the evening, reviewing the day's work, he sat a little closer than strictly necessary. Neither of them spoke about it. Sarah told herself she was being foolish, imagining things. Grant was her employer, nothing more. He had given her a job, a chance at independence, and she would not complicate that by developing inappropriate feelings. But feelings, Sarah was discovering, didn't listen to logic. One evening, about 6 weeks after Sarah's arrival, a storm rolled in suddenly, bringing violent thunder and sheets of rain. Sarah was in the barn checking on a mare who was close to foaling when the storm hit. The mare became agitated, pacing and whinnying in distress. Grant appeared in the barn, soaked from his run from the cabin. "How's she doing?" he asked, moving to the mare's stall. "Nervous," Sarah said. "I think the storm is scaring her." Grant entered the stall, speaking in low, soothing tones, running his hands over the mare's sides. "She's in labor," he said. "Starting anyway? This is her first foal. She's going to need help." What followed was a long, tense night. The storm raged outside while inside the barn, Grant and Sarah worked together to help the struggling mare. Grant was patient and skilled, knowing exactly when to intervene and when to let nature take its course. Sarah followed his instructions, helping to position the foal, providing support and encouragement. Finally, just after midnight, a perfect little colt slid into the world. The mare, exhausted, immediately began cleaning her baby, nuzzling it with obvious love. The colt struggled to its feet on wobbly legs, and Sarah felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "You did great," Grant said, his voice warm with approval. He was looking at her, not at the horses, and there was something in his expression that made Sarah's breath catch. They were both filthy, covered in blood and birth fluids and hay. The storm still rumbled outside, but in that moment, standing in the warm barn lit by a single lantern, watching new life take its first steps, Sarah felt something shift between them, some invisible boundary crossed. "Sarah," Grant said, and it was the first time he had used her first name without the miss attached. "I need to tell you something." Sarah's heart hammered. "What?" "When I offered you this job, I did it because it was the right thing to do, because you needed help and I needed help. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. You've become important to me, more important than just an employee. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I find excuses to be near you. When you smile, my whole day gets better. I think I'm falling for you, and I needed to say it even though I know I probably shouldn't. Sarah couldn't breathe. All the feelings she had been suppressing, denying, rushed to the surface. Grant, I feel it too. I've been trying not to because I didn't want to complicate things, didn't want to ruin what we have here. But when I'm with you, I feel safe and valued and seen in a way I never have before. You don't treat me like I'm fragile or incapable. You treat me like a partner. Grant stepped closer, his blue eyes intense. You are a partner, in every way that matters. Sarah, I know we haven't known each other that long, and I know you came here for independence, not romance. I'm not asking you to give up what you've found here. I'm asking if maybe we could build something together. As equals. As equals, Sarah repeated, and the words felt like a promise, like hope crystallized into reality. Grant reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. When she didn't, he cupped her face gently with his work-roughened hands. Can I kiss you? Yes, Sarah whispered. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question and an answer. Then it deepened, and Sarah felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. This wasn't like the fear and dread she had felt contemplating marriage to the men in town. This was right, natural, like coming home to a place she hadn't known existed. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Grant rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. I want to court you properly, give you time to be sure. You don't have to decide anything right now. I'm already sure, Sarah said, surprising herself with her certainty. Grant, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. I love you. I love you too, Grant said, and kissed her again. The storm passed, the new colt thrived, and Sarah and Grant's relationship grew and deepened over the following months. Grant was true to his word about courting her properly. They took time to talk, to learn each other's histories and dreams and fears. They worked side by side during the days and spent the evenings talking by the fire or walking along the creek in the cool twilight. Grant shared stories of his childhood, of a restless father who moved the family constantly before dying in a mine accident, of a mother who struggled but persevered, of his sister Emma who was his closest friend. Sarah told him about her own childhood, about a mother who loved poetry and music, about a father who had been broken by debt and loss but never gave up trying. They talked about the future too. Grant wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy the adjacent property if it ever came available. Sarah had ideas about breeding programs and marketing strategies that excited Grant with their practicality and vision. You see things I miss, Grant told her one evening. You think 3 steps ahead where I'm just focused on the next task in front of me. We make a good team. We do, Sarah agreed, and felt the truth of it bone deep. When the first cold weather arrived in November, bringing frost to the grass in the mornings, Grant asked Sarah to marry him. They were in the barn together feeding the horses, and he simply turned to her and said, Sarah Keller, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? There was no ring, no elaborate setup. But Sarah didn't need any of that. She needed the honesty in Grant's blue eyes, the calloused hand that reached for hers, the life they had already built together over the past months. Yes, Sarah said. 1,000 times, yes. They were married in the small church in Johnson City 3 weeks later, in early December of 1878. Emma came down from Colorado with her husband Robert, delighted that her brother had found happiness. A few of Grant's ranching friends attended, along with Mrs. Crawford from the boarding house and the proprietor from the general store. Even Ruby, the saloon girl who had spoken to Sarah that desperate night months ago, slipped into the back of the church and gave Sarah a small smile and a nod of approval. Henderson, the lawyer, attended looking somewhat bemused that Sarah had found her way without his marriage arrangements. Morton Briggs, Samuel Peterson, and Harold Wickham were notably absent, probably nursing their pride at having been rejected. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Emma had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Grant had ridden out early that morning to pick. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, and Grant kissed her in front of God and the assembled witnesses, Sarah felt a joy so complete it was almost frightening in its intensity. The reception was held at the ranch, and though it was small and simple, it was perfect. Emma and Robert stayed for a week, helping around the ranch and getting to know Sarah. Emma took Sarah aside one afternoon and hugged her tightly. "Thank you," Emma said, "for loving my brother. He's been alone too long, too focused on work and responsibility. You've brought light back into his life." "He saved mine," Sarah said simply. "When everyone else saw me as a problem to be solved, he saw me as a person with value. He gave me options when everyone else said marriage was my only choice. And then you chose marriage anyway," Emma said with a smile. "But on your own terms to a man you love. That makes all the difference." It did make all the difference, Sarah reflected that night as she lay beside Grant in the bed they now shared. This marriage, this partnership, was nothing like what she had been running from months ago. This was built on respect and friendship and love, on shared work and shared dreams. "What are you thinking about?" Grant murmured, pulling her closer. "How lucky I am," Sarah said. "How different my life is from what I thought it would be." "Lucky as finding you that day in town," Grant said. "Best decision I ever made, offering you that job." "Best decision I ever made, accepting it," Sarah replied, and kissed him. The winter passed peacefully. Sarah and Grant settled into married life with surprising ease. They worked together during the days, managing the ranch and preparing for the spring when the colts would be ready to sell. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, planning and dreaming. Sarah continued to manage the books, which were now in perfect order, and she had started corresponding with potential buyers for the horses, negotiating deals that impressed Grant with their savvy. "You're a better business person than I am," Grant said one evening, reviewing a contract Sarah had negotiated that would bring in substantially more money than he had expected. "I'm just protecting our interests," Sarah said. "These horses are worth the price I'm asking. People will pay for quality." "Our interests," Grant repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." Spring arrived with wildflowers covering the hills, and the colts grown into strong young horses. True to Grant's prediction, they sold well, bringing in enough money to pay off the remaining mortgage on the ranch and leave a healthy cushion in the bank. Grant promptly gave Sarah the bonus he had promised months ago, plus a raise in her wages, even though as his wife she technically didn't need wages. "You earned it," Grant said. "This is as much your ranch as mine now. More, really, since you're the one actually keeping it running smoothly." With the financial pressure eased, Grant and Sarah began to make improvements to the ranch. They built a second barn, expanded the paddocks, and added to the breeding program. Sarah's ideas for selective breeding and careful record keeping paid off, with each generation of horses being stronger and more consistent in quality. Grant's reputation spread, and buyers began coming from as far away as San Antonio and Austin to purchase his horses. By summer, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She told Grant one evening after supper, nervous despite knowing he would be happy. They hadn't planned it, but they hadn't prevented it either, and Sarah had mixed feelings about the timing. "You're sure?" Grant asked, his face lighting up with joy. "Pretty sure," Sarah said. "The signs are all there." Grant swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "We're going to have a baby. Sarah, we're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Sarah asked. "I know it will complicate things around the ranch." "Complicate things?" Grant set her down gently and cupped her face. "Sarah, you've just told me the best news of my life. Yes, I'm happy, ecstatic. Terrified, but ecstatic." "I'm terrified too," Sarah admitted. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if something goes wrong?" "You're going to be an amazing mother," Grant said firmly. And nothing is going to go wrong because I'm going to take care of you every step of the way. We'll get the doctor from town to check on you regularly. Emma can come down when it's time. You're not going through this alone. Grant was true to his word. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, he was attentive without being smothering, taking over the heavier ranch work while still allowing Sarah to do what she could. He brought the doctor out once a month to check on her, and Emma came down for an extended visit in Sarah's seventh month, staying to help and wait for the birth. The baby was born on a cold February morning in 1880, almost exactly a year and a half after Sarah had first arrived in Johnson City, believing she had no options. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sarah was certain she couldn't continue. But Grant was there, holding her hand, encouraging her, and Emma was there with her practical knowledge and calm support. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, the doctor announced, "It's a boy, a healthy baby boy." Grant cried. Sarah had never seen him cry before, but tears streamed down his face as he held his son for the first time. "He's perfect," Grant whispered. "Sarah, look what we made. He's absolutely perfect." They named him James after Sarah's father. Little James Coleman had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn chin, and from the first day he owned their hearts completely. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming, and more wonderful than Sarah had imagined possible. Grant was a hands-on father, changing diapers and walking the floor with a crying baby at night, insisting that Sarah rest because she was still recovering. Emma stayed for 6 weeks, helping establish routines and teaching both new parents the basics of baby care. "You're naturals," Emma said before she left. "James is lucky to have you both." As James grew, the ranch continued to thrive. Sarah managed to balance motherhood with her ranch duties, often carrying James in a sling while she worked on the books or checked on the horses. Grant was constantly amazed by her ability to manage everything. "I don't know how you do it," he said one evening, watching Sarah nurse James while simultaneously reviewing a contract with a cavalry officer. "I do it because I have a partner who does his share," Sarah said. "You're with James as much as I am. We're doing this together." "Together," Grant echoed and kissed the top of her head. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and family. James grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved the horses as much as his father did. When he was 3, Sarah gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara after Grant's mother. Clara was quieter than James, more observant, with her father's blue eyes and a thoughtful nature that reminded Sarah of herself. The ranch expanded steadily. With Sarah's business acumen and Grant's skill with horses, they became one of the most successful breeding operations in Central Texas. They hired 2 permanent hands to help with the work, young men who lived in a bunkhouse Grant built near the barn. Sarah trained them not just in ranch work, but in record keeping and animal husbandry, wanting them to have skills that would serve them well in the future. "You're still doing it," Grant said one evening, watching Sarah patiently teach one of the hands how to balance the feed accounts. "Doing what?" Sarah asked. "Giving people options," Grant said. "Teaching them skills so they can have choices in life, just like I tried to give you options when you needed them." Sarah looked at her husband, at his beloved face lined now with years of sun and smiles, and felt her heart swell with love. "You gave me more than options," she said. "You gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You gave me partnership and respect and love. You gave me a family and a home and work that matters. You gave me myself." Grant pulled her close, and they stood together in the doorway of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. James and Clara played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The horses grazed peacefully in the paddocks. The life Sarah had been so terrified of losing years ago had been replaced by something infinitely better. "I love you," Grant said. "From that first day when I saw you sitting outside the general store, looking lost and determined at the same time, I think I knew you were going to be important to me. I just didn't realize how important." "I love you too," Sarah said. "Thank you for showing me that marriage didn't have to be a trap, that it could be a choice, a partnership, a joy." They stood together as the stars began to appear. Two people who had found each other at the right moment, who had built something real and lasting out of desperation and hope and hard work. Sarah thought back to that terrified young woman in the lawyer's office being told marriage was her only option to survive. She wished she could go back and tell that woman that sometimes the best options are the ones you create for yourself, with someone who sees you as an equal, who gives you the space to grow and the support to soar. The years continued to unfold in blessing and challenge. There were hard times, droughts that tested their water resources, markets that fluctuated, children who got sick and scared them. But through it all, Sarah and Grant faced everything together, their partnership strengthening with each challenge overcome. When James was 12 and Clara was 9, Sarah gave birth to their third and final child, another boy they named Thomas. By then, the ranch was well established and profitable. They had expanded to over 500 acres, employed 6 hands year-round, and supplied horses to cavalry units across Texas and into neighboring territories. Sarah had also quietly started a program to help young women in situations similar to what hers had been. When she heard of women struggling, alone, and being pushed into marriages they didn't want, she would offer them employment at the ranch, teaching them skills and giving them time to figure out their own paths. Some stayed on permanently, becoming skilled ranch hands or horse trainers. Others moved on after a few years, taking their new skills to start their own ventures or to make better marriage choices from positions of strength rather than desperation. Grant supported this program wholeheartedly, proud of his wife's compassion and practical help. "You're giving them what I gave you," he said, "options and dignity." "I'm giving them what we built together," Sarah corrected. "This ranch, this life, it's not just yours or mine, it's ours, and we can afford to share it, to help others find their way." The children grew up surrounded by love and purpose. James inherited his father's skill with horses and his mother's head for business. By the time he was 18, he was running much of the day-to-day operation of the ranch, allowing Grant and Sarah to step back slightly and enjoy a bit more leisure. Clara surprised everyone by developing a talent for veterinary medicine, learning from the circuit vet who came through regularly, and eventually going to study formally, one of the few women in the field. Thomas, the youngest, was still finding his way, but he had his mother's love of books and learning, talking about maybe becoming a lawyer or a teacher. Sarah and Grant encouraged all their children to find their own paths, to pursue their passions, knowing that the ranch would continue in one form or another regardless. On a warm evening in May of 1895, Sarah and Grant sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were in their late 40s now, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and work and life well lived. Their children were grown, or nearly so, healthy and happy, and launched into their own lives. "Do you ever think about that day we met?" Sarah asked, her hand in Grant's. "I think about it often," Grant said. "I think about how close I came to not going into town that day, how many little things had to align for us to find each other." "Fate," Sarah said. "Or luck. Or blessing. Whatever it was, I'm grateful for it every day," Grant said. He squeezed her hand. "Do you have any regrets? Things you wish had been different?" Sarah thought about it seriously. She thought about the scared young woman she had been, the desperate choices she had faced, the life she had feared losing, and the life she had gained instead. "No regrets," she said finally. "Everything that happened, even the hard parts, led me here. To you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" "I have one regret," Grant said, and Sarah looked at him in surprise. He smiled. "I regret that I didn't kiss you sooner. That first night in the barn with the mare and the foal, I should have kissed you then instead of waiting." Sarah laughed, the sound rich and happy. "We had all the time we needed. We still do." "We do," Grant agreed, and pulled her close, kissing her as the sun set on another beautiful day in the life they had built together. The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Sarah and Grant gradually handed over the bulk of the ranch work to James and the capable hands they had trained. They traveled some, visiting Emma and Robert in Colorado, seeing more of Texas, even taking a trip to New Orleans that both of them found fascinating and slightly overwhelming after the quiet of ranch life. Clara finished her veterinary training and returned to the area, setting up a practice that served ranchers throughout the region. She was in high demand and making a name for herself in a field dominated by men. Sarah was fiercely proud of her daughter's courage and skill. Thomas did indeed become a teacher, taking a position at the school in Johnson City, which had grown considerably since Sarah's first desperate days there. He married a lovely young woman named Rachel, a schoolteacher herself, and they started a family of their own. James married Anna, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they took over the Coleman Ranch completely, running it with the same care and skill that Grant and Sarah had. They gave Grant and Sarah 5 grandchildren to spoil and love. Sarah and Grant built a smaller house on the property, giving James and Anna the main house with its memories and history. Their new home was cozy and perfect for two people who had earned the right to slow down and enjoy the fruits of decades of hard work. In the spring of 1910, Sarah and Grant celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary. They held a large party at the ranch, with all their children and grandchildren, the ranch hands past and present, friends from town, and the many young women Sarah had helped over the years. It was a testament to the life they had built, the people they had touched, the difference they had made. During the party, Emma, now in her 70s herself, pulled Sarah aside. "Do you remember what I said to you at your wedding?" Emma asked. "That you had brought light back into Grant's life?" "I remember," Sarah said. "I was wrong," Emma said, smiling. "You didn't just bring light back. You and Grant created light together, and it spread to everyone around you. Look at this." She gestured at the gathering, the laughter, the love, the community. "This is what you two built. Not just a ranch, but a legacy of kindness and opportunity." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "We just did what seemed right," she said. "That's what makes it so special," Emma said. "You never sought credit or praise. You just lived your values every day. The world needs more people like you and my brother." As the party continued into the evening, Sarah found Grant standing by the corral, watching the horses in the twilight. She joined him, slipping her hand into his in the gesture that had become second nature over 3 decades together. "Happy anniversary," Sarah said. "Happy anniversary," Grant replied. 32 years. Sometimes it feels like forever, and sometimes it feels like we just started yesterday." "I know what you mean," Sarah said. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sarah asked, "Grant, do you remember what you said to me that day in the restaurant, when you first offered me the job?" "I remember all of it," Grant said. "Every word of every conversation we've ever had is precious to me." "You said you were giving me options beyond marriage," Sarah said, "and you did. You gave me the option to be independent, to work, to have value beyond being someone's wife. And then wonderfully, you also gave me the option to choose marriage freely, from a place of strength rather than desperation. You gave me both freedom and love. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." Grant turned to her, his blue eyes still as striking as they had been 3 decades ago, if surrounded now by wrinkles and silver hair. "Sarah, you gave me just as much. You took a chance on a lonely cowboy with more dreams than sense. You built this ranch with me, raised our children with me, created a life that's richer than anything I could have imagined alone. We gave each other everything that matters." "We did," Sarah agreed, "and I'd choose it all again every single day." "Even the hard parts?" Grant asked, smiling. "Especially the hard parts," Sarah said. "They made us who we are." They kissed there by the corral as the stars came out, two people who had defied the limitations placed on them, who had built something extraordinary out of mutual respect and shared work and deep, abiding love. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and activity, a testament to what was possible when people were given options. when they were seen as partners rather than problems. Sarah Keller Coleman lived to be 83 years old, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1940 with Grant beside her, holding her hand as he had for over 6 decades. Grant followed her just 3 months later, unable to imagine life without his partner, his love, his Sarah. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built under the wide Texas sky they both loved. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, in the ranch that continued to thrive, in the community they had served, and in the countless women whose lives had been changed because Sarah Keller had once been given options beyond marriage by a kind cowboy named Grant Coleman, and then had chosen to spend her life creating those same options for others. The Coleman Ranch still operates today, run by the fifth generation of the family, a testament to what two people can build when they see each other as equals, when they work together toward shared dreams, when they choose love freely rather than accepting it as an obligation. And somewhere on that ranch, in the main house that James and Anna's descendants still occupy, hangs a faded photograph of Sarah and Grant taken on their 50th wedding anniversary. They are old in the photo, weathered by decades of Texas sun and hard work, but their eyes shine with unmistakable joy and their hands are clasped together, still partners, still equals, still deeply in love after 50 years of marriage, built on the solid foundation of respect, trust, and the simple but profound belief that everyone deserves options, dignity, and the freedom to choose their own path.